Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk, The Automated Acceptance Testing Paradox. It's awesome to be here. I'm from the UK. I feel quite a fish out of water at the moment, but I'm really enjoying myself, and it's awesome to see such a big testing community here in Kyiv. So I'm going to be talking about what I call the Automated Acceptance Testing Paradox. This talk is about desires, building the right thing, assumptions around test automation, and strategies. So just to get sort of a feel of who I'm talking to at the moment, who works or has a team that works with sort of automated acceptance testing, you know, Cucumber, BDD tools, working with tools like WebDriver as well. Anybody working with that sort of thing? Yeah, it's very popular, isn't it? Cool, so yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about around that and how we need to sort of consider our attitudes towards these tools and our strategies behind those assumptions. So who am I? Who is this jumped up geezer from London? My name is Mark Winteringham. I am a tester. I'm a teacher, mentor and coach as well around testing. I'm an advocate for automation in testing, which I'll be talking about a little bit in this talk. And I have a website, mwtestconsultancy.co.uk, where I write about a lot of sort of test automation stuff. I do a lot of how-tos to build little tools to work with API stuff. I do a lot of training in API testing and frameworks and stuff, so if you want to talk about API stuff, give me a shout. I'm going to be around today and tomorrow. If you have any questions, but you're too shy to ask at the end, or you find that I'm missing or anything, you can get in touch with me at 2BitTester or on LinkedIn. Just to do a little bit of a plug, as you might have noticed, I am the co-founder of Software Testing Clinic, which is a safe environment to learn about software testing. Currently, we're based in the UK, but we are looking to grow in the future. And we are part of the Ministry of Testing family. So what we do is we run meetups and workshops where we teach people who are looking to get into software testing or juniors in software testing. We show them the ropes. We show them different techniques and different ideas and stuff to hopefully help them be better testers or find that first job. But we also offer sort of activities for more senior testers. So we have senior testers that come along and they're mentors. And they get experience of leadership, teaching, coaching, and stuff like that. Now, obviously, that's all kind of UK-based at the moment, but we do have an online part to this where we create videos. We have discussions and stuff, so if you want to sort of mentor from your house, from your room, I welcome you all to sort of contribute, ask questions, get involved online, and you can find all of that on softwaretestingclinic.com. I think it's .com. Yes, it is .com. Right, that's the plugging bit done and the sales pitch. So a little bit of context around this talk. So I've worked with BDD and behavior-driven development for quite a while as a tester. Hands up, you've heard of BDD, behavior-driven development? Excellent, right, I don't really need to explain that too much then. And I've had a real love-hate relationship with it. There have been times when I've really seen its value, or thought I'd seen its value, but made the wrong assumptions. And then there are times when I've gone, it's not testing, it's horrible, like why would anyone do it and stuff. But the more I worked with BDD, the more I realized that I actually didn't understand it properly. So I kind of went on a journey to explore what it is that BDD is, how that connects to automation and test automation, and why it is that some of the times that as testers we get the wrong end of the stick, we misinterpret the role of something like BDD. I gave a talk last year, it's pretty much like almost a year now, where I sort of shared my experiences of ways in which I'd used Gherkin scenarios incorrectly. And what was interesting that came out of that was this discussion that I think as testers, we understand like part of it is the collaboration, the communication side. I think a lot of us get that part. The bit that confuses us is the test automation part. When we actually start looking at the tools, when we start automating those Gherkin scenarios. So that's what this talk, again, is about. It's sort of analyzing that assumption that it's just about, you know, I automate a bunch of acceptance tests and therefore, you know, job done. Well done, slap myself on the back and get a bonus. Okay, so it's not just all about me. We're going to do a little game. I love games. What is acceptable? So the goal of a software development team is to deliver something our business or customers desire. And if we fail to do that, we fail to do our jobs, and that could lead to our product or project failing. So how do we know what is the right thing to deliver? So I'm going to show you 2 screenshots of a web page. You will recognize it. And honestly, like, you know, there is no trap. I'm not trying to be clever. That comes later. I just want to get your feeling of what you feel is acceptable. And I'm going to make a note. So, this is the first screenshot. Who thinks this is acceptable? Don't be shy, you can put your hand up if you feel it is. No one? Okay. Who thinks this is acceptable? Yeah? Okay, I'm not even going to bother writing down stuff, so I'm just going to put like 0 for the first one and lots of hands up for the second one. So I would agree. I find that acceptable. I like it. It's got colors. It's laid out nicely. It's a very good website, by the way. I can read it. I can understand it sort of in terms of how everything's structured together. You know, we have like the menu at the top, which here it's not at the top because basically I've turned the CSS and the JavaScript off. Okay, so we feel this is acceptable. So how do we interpret that? How do we, you know, a business says they have an idea of what they feel is acceptable. So we as teams have to work that out. So that's why we use acceptance tests. Acceptance tests are there to help us define those expectations from our business. So I got 2 definitions when I was trying to sort of find things that sort of describe acceptance tests in a sort of small way. One from Gojko Adzik. Acceptance tests should reflect customers' perception of when the job is done. And from Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory, acceptance tests are tests that define the business value each story must deliver. Now they're slightly different, but there is 2 key patterns in here, 2 key points. First of all is perception, business value. It's around the risk of the person who's kind of paying the bills. And that might be, yeah, your business person, you know, your CEO or something like that, or it might be your users. So we're thinking about what we're delivering in the perspective of that end user or business, or the person that matters, as sometimes it's used. When the job is done, and each story must deliver. So it's a definition of done for us, okay? So we're using acceptance tests to define those expectations. And then we're actually saying, have we met those expectations? Brilliant, we're done, move on to the next thing. So that's how we define what is acceptable. Okay, so then we move into the automation side of this. Why do we automate? So there are 2 activities, 2 ways in which it assists us. The first of all is in test coverage. So we're potentially in a sort of agile-based setup. And we're in sprint 1, and we're working on story 1. We've got our acceptance tests. We deliver it, we've hit that definition of done, and we move to sprint 2. Now, obviously, we need to work on the new stuff, but we still need to test the other stuff potentially, because we're concerned something might change in the system. So we automate our acceptance tests, and that builds up and becomes a regression pack, and we run that. And that's where we sort of tend to use the tools like WebDriver, potentially Cucumber, SpecFlow, that sort of thing. Trying to do these potentially end-to-end, maybe targeted. We'll see. Now, this is the bit that I think that trips us up as testers. So the outside-in development approach. This is a design technique for developers. This is not a way of validating systems, as I will explain. But the principle is, we have an acceptance test. We've defined that with our business. And we want to create some automation behind that so that it fails. And then the developer will build a bunch of unit tests. And they will fail as well, but they'll build the right amount of code to make that unit test pass. So this is TDD. And once they've passed, you can refactor, change your code, make it look nicer and shiny, and then start again. More and more unit tests until you've got enough that your acceptance test goes green. This is a tool to give feedback to developers. I was recently watching a talk from Matt Wine, who works over at Cucumber. And he was talking about the idea that BDD is like a level. You're using it as a means to sort of make sure that you're building the right thing all the time, because you don't want a crooked wall. I like that analogy. That's what this is for. So it's to assist developers, keep them honest. And again, they might be using WebDriver, Cucumber, end-to-end testing, that sort of thing. Now, the problem is when you're using these tools like WebDriver, if I ran that test and I said, go through the application, press this button, do this thing, get to the page that I want to get to, and assert that this HTML exists or this class exists, if you ran that assert, both of these would pass. Now, we've all just said that we like the one on the left, but our automation is now telling us the one on the right is acceptable. Now, is that the fault of WebDriver? No. WebDriver is a great tool, but it has to be, a good tool, a great tool, is designed to do one thing and one thing well. WebDriver is designed to help us operate a browser without having to do it with our hands. But a tool doesn't consider the assumptions, the emotions of our business people, our end users, the people that matter. I always find it interesting when someone from the business perspective, they say something like, oh, I want it so that when I press this button, it does a search. But they don't say, and also I don't want it to crash. And also I don't want to lose the data. And also I don't want to lose my job. And I want to get paid. And I'm, terrified that I'm going to lose my job. And I want it to make me look good. There's so much more going on around an acceptance test that gets lost sometimes when we're using automation. And this is the automated acceptance testing paradox. We have business expectations. And they are documented using acceptance tests. And acceptance tests are confirmed as delivered through automation. But automation is unable to fully confirm business expectations. So that is the paradox. So why as, not just testers, as teams, do we fall into this trap of using these tools and overly trusting them in terms of what they're feeding back to us? Well, there is an excellent book, but it is probably one of the hardest read I've ever had. It's called General Systems Thinking by Jerry Weinberg. Has anyone read General Systems Thinking? I got one person, yeah, I felt very much half and half. I read it, I don't know if I fully understood it. It's a great book, I would encourage everyone to read it, but it takes a lot, it's a lot to take in. But near the start, he talks about the general systems problem. And this is what it is. You have 3 types of systems. Now, one of those systems is not necessary to what we do in terms of testing, and that's called, what is it? It's disorganized complexity. So, ignoring that one, we work with 2 types of systems. We have organized simplicity. So this is when we have a system that has a set amount of rules, set amount of behavior that we can actually predict. So we think about, as testers, we're trying to sort of uncover information and trying to understand the system. If we're working with something small, an organized system, or a simple organized system, you can do that. You can find all the things, think of all the tests, think of all the questions that need to be asked. Now, when we do something like TDD, or when we test something as close as possible to its nearest interface, that's easy. That makes that easy. It makes it organized and simple. We can get close to that ideal of exhaustive testing, even though that's obviously never achievable, but we can feel comfortable in that. Then we have organized complexity. So this is systems that have lots of rules. They have lots of integrations. There's lots of things that we need to predict. And if we apply the assumption that we can just test an organized complex system in the same way that we could test an organized simple system, then there's a lot we're missing. So we have to change our assumptions. We don't need to change our tooling, but we just need to change our assumptions about what it is that we're getting in terms of feedback from our systems. If you think about a risk, you think about acceptance testing is mitigating a risk. Okay, so we're mitigating. Oh, that comes off quite quickly. I should put it down there. So the risk here is that we are making sure that we sort of deliver what the user wants. Okay. So let's go with a search field. Okay. We've delivered like the front page of Google. We've delivered something that we can search. That's just one risk that we've potentially proven with our automation, with our acceptance tests. What if, I think about other risks beyond that. So security risks. I've delivered what the user wants, but it might be that there's vulnerabilities in its security stuff. Data risks. There is accessibility risks. There is, performance, yes. I don't know why I've forgotten all the risks. Like, my brain has gone blank, but performance. Any others? Anyone else want to add some? Sorry? Usability, yep. And that kind of sits, you might be a little bit half in, a little bit half out. Usability. Any others? Sorry? Scalability, yes, absolutely. So that sort of scale. Platform. What happens if I turn bits of it off? How does that work? What if other people want to use it in a different way, so interface? So we have all these different types of risks that as testers we're trying to test for and trying to reveal information about. But an automated acceptance test is only giving us potentially half of delivering what the user wants. So we need to think about the role our automation takes and the strategies that we put in place. So should we ditch acceptance tests? No, they are useful. But I like to think of them as automated acceptance tests are for guiding, not for validating. They cannot replace what we do as testers. And they shouldn't, but they can help us. So there's a lot of talk about testing versus checking and that sort of stuff, which I'll sort of touch on. But a chap called Richard Bradshaw, friendly tester, colleague of mine, he says that a failed check is an invitation to explore. So we want to use these automated checks or tests, depending on how you want to call them. We're going to use them, but we're going to use them to stem and encourage other testing activities. So first of all, for me, things that are automated are checks, as far as I'm concerned. And that's not because I'm trying to say that automation is bad. I'm saying that it's a skill. It's a skill within testing. It's something that helps me, but I do other things. And because I think of them as checks, they help me to monitor change within my application, rather than validate the quality, whatever that means. So I'm thinking that if something fails, so if my search field check failed, I'd be like, well, why did that fail? Let me explore around that search field. I was talking to Ilari last night about this, and I came up with this idea that that check is your tip of your iceberg, and you've got all sorts of other risks and stuff going on underneath the water. If you can see that tip of the iceberg coming towards your boat, what's going on underneath the water? So that check is going, if that fails, then I'm actually thinking, right, I need to explore. So I need other testing activities. Also, if I think of them as checks, and they're passing all the time, and all my application is changing, my product's changing all the time, but my checks are still green after 3 weeks, I might want to question them, because they're guides, they're fallible, they're flawed. So it might be that it's looking at the wrong thing, so I might want to look at those checks and sort of say, well, actually, are they checking the right thing? And what they do as well is they help me to engage with the business. If something fails, then I can potentially go to developers and say something's failed functionally, but it might actually stem some ideas around talking to the business, talking to my product owner. So acceptance checks as guides can be a heuristic to set me on the right path in other testing activities. Okay. So we have automated, so we're using these tests as checks. And we're thinking that actually there's all these other different things that we need to cover. So how do we strategize our automation so that it fits within our testing and helps us, but also we can ensure that we're delivering good testing that covers all these different bits? Well, when I think of testing and test strategies, I am always reminded of a diagram that a tester called James Lindsay showed me once. And now he talks about it in a sort of the context of exploratory testing, but I like to think of it sort of as a bit wider. I think my ear thing's got a bit funny. There we go. So he created a Venn diagram. So we have two things in a project. We have imagination and we have implementation. Okay, so imagination and implementation. And this is what the business wants, and this is what we are delivering as a team. And the goal is, as testers, is to learn as much as possible so that we can get those two very badly drawn circles. That looks like a pear, an upside-down pear or something. I'm not very good at artwork. We want to get those two circles to overlap. We want it so that what we're delivering is exactly what the users want. So when we think about automated acceptance tests, we're actually we're covering this bit. I've just realized how unfortunate this looks. I know why you're sniggering. Grow up. It will change. But the point being is that this can help us understand this part here, because we've already sort of codified the imagination. And then we've created some automation around it to run and give us feedback about the product to say if it matches that imagination. We've implemented what they want. So when I think about this, sometimes I actually wonder even if this does cover this exhaustively, especially when we sort of think about that problem with WebDriver, that it's maybe giving us faulty feedback sometimes. So, other activities. Collaborative discussions. So, to find out more about this imagination stuff, I want to test requirements. I want to ask questions. I want to pair with people and mob. I want to find out as much about what's going on in my product owner's head or my BA's head or whoever that person is that's saying this is what I want. I want to get as much information from them as possible. So that helps me with the imagination side. But I also want to find out implementation as well. I work from home. This is the most exercise I've done in a week. It's crazy. Okay, with implementation, I want to do exploratory testing. I want to explore all those different types of risks. I want to think about those. I want to understand more what the developers are doing with the TDD stuff. And I want to, like when it comes to exploratory testing, I want to sort of deep dive. I want to break the system to pieces. Not break it as in find bugs, but I want to break it down into its parts. Maybe make some of it those simple systems so I can test those and then expand from that. But I also maybe want to go broad as well. I want to think about all this sorts of other things. Now, that would always be informed by what's going on in the imagination. But that's not it. That's not just it. So there's automation in testing. There's other activities that we can still do with automation. So myself and Richard Bradshaw, we're trying to sort of work on a namespace of this. James Bark and Michael Bolton have written a white paper about this, which is worth reading. But for me, the idea is that automation is there to support us. So we have our automated acceptance tests or checks, and they're already supporting me because they're informing me of different exploratory testing activities I might want to do. And think about sort of different discussions that I want to have. But again, automated acceptance tests are only focusing on a specific risk. I might want to do other automation that doesn't necessarily need to be tied to acceptance tests. So, like I say, I teach API testing. I'm really sort of quite into that. So I could have data-driven API checks that just basically connect to an endpoint and throw loads of data at it and then tells me what worked and what didn't work. Now, business might not necessarily be interested in that, but I am, because I want to get some bugs out of that and write some things up and share some information. I can think about breaking down again this application and thinking like, well, there's JavaScript in this, so let's build checks that just focus purely on the JavaScript. I'm not interested in the whole thing and is it what the business wants. I just want to see how that bit works. So we can build lots of different types of targeted checks that tell us a small piece of what's going on. But it's me, the tester. My knowledge is what's bringing it all together. I'm just using the checks to do that for me while I can focus on something else or think about other activities I can be doing. But it doesn't just stop there as well. We can use automation in testing to also support our exploratory testing as well. So when I think about what I'm doing as an exploratory tester, I mean, we must have all been at that point when you're like, I have filled this form in like 50,000 times. I'm so sick and tired of filling this form in. I was working on a product recently and it was driving me mad. So I built a Chrome extension where I press a button and it fills all the values in for me. That's not doing any asserting. That's just filling in all the stuff for me so that I can then continue my exploratory testing at a faster pace. So think about the activities that you're doing in your test teams. If you are an automator and that's primarily your job, speak to your testers. Maybe speak to your developers and go, what is it that you are constantly having to do all the time? Can I help you with that? So someone says, I have to set up an environment by myself manually and I have to run a bunch of bash scripts. Maybe look about pulling all those together. Or think about how you could use tools like Docker or Vagrant and see if they can help. So that supports what's going on in the rest of my strategy. So, wrapping up, be aware of your assumptions. Don't be too overly reliant on automated checks and automated tests. They cannot replace what we do as testers, but they can certainly support us. I'm not saying go back and delete all your code and become Kumbaya singing exploratory testers. Just do that all the time. But think about what that covers, what that tooling is, what value you're getting from that, but also what value you're not getting from it. And think about other testing activities. Use them as guides or indicators. If something is not working, then find out more, because it's just the tip of the iceberg. And other testing activities are required. So I think some of you might have come in, because I am aware I'm on the automation track, but I've not really talked about any tools or anything. I'm talking about strategy. But it's important to remember, like, you know, the tools are fun. I love coding. I love building things. But we do need to think about what is the bigger picture? What is it that I'm missing? And what things can I do to fill in the gaps of my horribly, horribly drawn diagram? So all that's left for me to say is thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we've got 5 minutes left, so I wanted to sort of open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Если у кого есть вопросы, поднимайте руку, я подойду.
I do like to think that if no one has any questions, it's because I've just solved all your problems and blown all your minds, so it's easy as that. Well, if we've got a few minutes, if there's anything anyone wants to ask me about sort of automation in general or API stuff, I'm willing to answer that. We might as well use the time while we're here. got one. Gentleman over there.
Hello. What kind of testing reporting tool do you use?
Test reporting.
Maybe Allure reporting.
Oh, sorry?
Allure reporting for Yandex developer.
Sorry.
It's Allure report. This is tool that developed by Yandex.
Oh, okay.
company.
No, I've not come across that. Sorry.
Okay, and what tool do you use?
So we're talking about sort of on the sort of automation side, yeah, yeah. So well, recently, so going back to that idea that it's all about sort of guiding me to do other activities. I don't tend to use reporting heavily in automation because I think that. So I don't know if you saw Ilari's talk earlier when he's talking about metrics, is that it kind of feeds that monster a little bit if you have tools that are constantly showing you things like code coverage and that sort of thing. So the reporting that I tend to use is just sort of typical sort of pass-fail thing that you would get from something like a tool like JUnit. Because then what I will do is I will explore after that, and the reporting that comes out of that might actually be an exploratory test session, some bug reports, or a discussion from that. But one thing I have been really interested in at the moment is approval testing, which is comparing previous states to a new state and diffing. And I think that's quite interesting because that actually not only just gives you sort of a pass-fail in terms of reporting, but actually sort of gives you an indicator, like gives you more information around what has actually failed. Because a lot of the time it's sort of, I think like with things like WebDriver, when you sort of have no such element found, well, what does that mean? Like, is it because the back end hasn't produced it? Is it because the CSS has changed? Is it because Selenium's just decided to have 10 minutes off? So I'm really interested in that at the moment. So I don't know if that fully answers your question in terms of reporting. It's I think I've been quite lucky that I've not been in situations where I had to be very heavy on the metrics side, which I know is not the case for a lot of people. But I would go back to my previous point that if they're there for guides to explore, they're there to support me in other things I'm going to do. They're not there telling me whether or not our team is doing a good job or a bad job. That was a terrible answer, I feel. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, an unknown is, yeah. When it says an unknown occurrence, so the question was like, what the sort of follow-up was that sort of talking about stack traces and how they give you very little information. Yeah, I've been working on a product that pretty much just says an unknown error has occurred all the time and then gives me about 1,000 lines of stack trace to sort of feed through. In previous times, I pair with developers, I talk with them, and I ask them questions and go, well, what if this goes wrong? And they'll go, oh, well, we don't need to worry about fixing that. We go, all right, fine, but can we at least have something meaningful output, some proper logging as well, that actually tells us what's gone wrong, or like, exit gracefully. So I think that's more of like getting involved in the design part and working with developers and stuff. My voice is giving the ghost. One more, yeah? I am around, so if you still want to ask me, I think the mic's gone to the person behind you, I'm afraid, sorry.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
What is your opinion when you create acceptance tests? Who should be involved here? Only QA with requirements, or QA and stakeholders, product owners? And also, when you start doing after automation, exploratory testing, testing and automation, should you invite your stakeholders to understand the testing domain, to be like So now we all vote that left part was much better than right part. But you as a QA maybe have no knowledge about your product as have your stakeholders. So you should invite your stakeholders to all exploratory testing procedures or what?
Okay, so two things there about collaboration around writing our acceptance tests and our requirements. I knew I'd forgotten something when I was talking. And then talking about sort of getting feedback beyond that. So in terms of the collaboration stuff, I fully subscribe to the whole 3 Amigos idea, or some form of that. I've worked in 4 or 5 Amigos. Developer, tester, someone from product, some sort of business insight into it. I think the thing that you have to be, what I've found sometimes is when I do 3 Amigos, that catches us out is that we feel like we have to exhaustively test everything, when really actually what we should be doing is just testing the idea. So that feeds into the second question. We actually ran a software testing clinic a couple of days ago. And we were doing it all around testing requirements. And one of our mentors actually he's a developer, but he spends a lot of time working with agile projects and stuff. And he just said, just any opportunity that you have to have someone from the business sit with you so you can show them something is useful and it's vital, because things might change in their minds. You know, they'll say, I want a shape. You think a circle, they think a triangle. There are going to be gaps. So you use those, like any opportunities that you have. So I was working on a team once where we would have a half hour every day, because our team sat together, but our product owner was on the floor above. He'd come down, sit with us, and he'd just go, what you got for me? And that worked really well. And what we found was that the gaps that we had, we could actually sort of then think of other activities that we could do to sort of improve it. Cool. I think we've sort of gone over time. So thank you again for having me here, organisers, and thank you for listening. Like I say, I'll be around today and tomorrow, so if you have any other questions, please come grab me. Thank you.